still remember the rain that night. Not the gentle, cleansing kind that washes away troubles, but the merciless downpour that drenches you to the bone, making everything heavier, including the weight of your decisions. 3 hours earlier, I had walked out of the suburban prison I'd called home for 6 years. The door hadn't even slammed behind me. Craig was too drunk to notice I was leaving for good this time. My cheek still stung where his wedding ring had connected with my skin. The irony wasn't lost on me. The symbol of our union now marked me in the most honest way our relationship had in years. The duffel bag slung across my shoulder contained everything I could call mine. Some clothes, toiletries, $247 in cash, and the locket my grandmother had given me before she died. Everything else belonged to Craig, as he'd reminded me countless times. The furniture, the car, my self-worth. Itajaí wasn't known for its reliable public transportation, especially after midnight, which is why I found myself trudging through the flooded streets, mascara running down my face, blending with the rain and tears I refused to acknowledge. The bus shelter offered minimal protection as I huddled there, my thin jacket doing little against the November chill. I was 32 years old and starting from scratch, with nowhere to go and no one to call. Need a ride? The voice came from behind me, deep and clear despite the rainfall's percussion. I didn't turn immediately. In my experience, kindness from strangers usually came with expectations. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice betraying me with a slight tremble. "You don't look fine." I turned then, ready to snap back with the last shreds of my dignity, but the words died on my lips. He stood under a large black umbrella, not quite under the shelter. Tall, imposingly so, dressed in what even my untrained eye could recognize as an expensive suit. Dark hair slicked back, revealing a face with sharp angles softened only by the faintest hint of stubble, but it was his eyes that held me. Dark as the night around us, observant, missing nothing. "I don't get into cars with strangers," I said, pulling my bag closer. A smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Smart woman." He took a step forward, and I noticed how the rain seemed to part for him, how the puddles knew better than to splash his immaculate leather shoes, Alessio Vitale. He extended his hand as if we were meeting at a business conference rather than a deserted bus stop past midnight. "That's supposed to make you less of a stranger?" I asked. "It's a start." His accent was slight but unmistakable. Italian, wrapped around each word like fine silk. Something about him made the hairs on my neck rise. Not entirely from fear, though there was that too. Power radiated from him, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Behind him, I noticed a black SUV with tinted windows, engine running. A large man stood beside it, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking his broad shoulders. "Where are you headed?" Alessio asked, as if he had all the time in the world, as if standing in the rain talking to a bedraggled woman was his evening plan. "Away?" I answered truthfully. "Anywhere away." He nodded as if he understood completely. "I know somewhere safe. No strings." I almost laughed. There were always strings. Craig had taught me that lesson thoroughly. Nothing was free, especially not from men who looked like they owned pieces of the world. "Why would you help me?" I challenged. "Perhaps I recognize a fellow escapee." His eyes flickered to my swollen cheek, then back to mine. "Or perhaps I just don't like seeing someone stranded in this weather." A crack of thunder punctuated his words, making me flinch. The universe's way of reminding me I had limited options. Stay here and eventually face Craig when he sobered up and came looking for me, or take a chance on this elegant stranger offering shelter. "One night," I said finally. "Just somewhere to stay tonight." He inclined his head slightly, satisfaction briefly crossing his features. "Of course." As he stepped aside, extending the umbrella to cover me, I realized I hadn't even told him my name. "Evelyn," I said, stepping cautiously toward him. "Evelyn Taylor. A pleasure, Evelyn Taylor." The way he said my name made it sound like something valuable, something worth tasting. The large man by the car moved immediately, opening the rear door. As we approached, I noticed how his eyes never settled, constantly scanning the empty street. Up close, I could see the slight bulge under his jacket, a gun. My steps faltered. Alessio's hand came to rest lightly on the small of my back, not pushing, just present. "Marco is my driver. You have nothing to fear." I wasn't so sure, but I was already in motion, already committed. The interior of the SUV was warm and smelled of leather and something distinctly masculine. As I slid across the seat, I noticed the partition between the front and back was raised. Privacy, or isolation. Alessio settled beside me, shaking droplets from his umbrella before closing it. "Take us to the Riverview," he instructed Marco, who nodded without speaking. "What's the Riverview?" I asked, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "A hotel I own. Discreet, comfortable." His gaze was heavy on me. "You'll have your own room, of course." The SUV pulled away from the curb, and I watched the bus stop recede, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or saved myself from spending the night in the rain. My fingers traced the tender spot on my cheek, and I caught Alessio watching the movement. "He won't find you there," he said quietly. I didn't ask how he knew there was a he, or why he assumed I was hiding. Something told me Alessio Vitale was accustomed to reading people, to seeing the stories written in their bruises and escape attempts. "I'm not looking for complications," I said, staring straight ahead. "Few people are. Life delivers them anyway." The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows as we drove, reminding me of all the tears I'd shed in bathrooms with locked doors, trying to muffle the sounds. 6 years of my life given to a man who'd convinced me I was worthless, while systematically stripping away everyone who told me otherwise. My friends, my family, my career in graphic design reduced to making flyers for his construction business without payment or credit. "What were you running from?" I asked suddenly, remembering his words at the bus stop. Alessio turned to me, surprise briefly crossing his features before his expression settled back into its composed mask. "What makes you think I was running? You said you recognized a fellow escapee." A smile touched his lips, perceptive. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. I escaped expectations, family obligations that would have suffocated the man I wanted to become. It wasn't the answer I expected. There was something rehearsed about it, too smooth, like a stone tumbled in water until all rough edges disappeared. We turned onto a street lined with upscale boutiques, now dark and shuttered for the night. At the end of the block stood a building that seemed to rise from the darkness like a monolith, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. The Riverview Hotel. As we pulled under the covered entrance, I noticed there was no sign, no obvious indication that this was a hotel at all. 2 men in suits immediately appeared, one opening Alessio's door while the other circled to mine. "Mr. Vitale," they murmured in unison, with a deference that spoke of more than employer-employee respect. Fear, perhaps, or devotion. The lobby was deserted except for a single attendant behind a sleek desk, who straightened immediately when he saw Alessio. "Mr. Vitale, we weren't expecting you tonight. Last-minute change of plans, Anthony." Alessio's tone was pleasant but left no room for questions. "The Riverside Suite, please." "Of course, sir." The attendant's eyes flicked to me, taking in my disheveled appearance, the bruise blooming on my cheek, before quickly returning to his computer. Alessio placed his hand on the counter, drawing the attendant's attention. "Ms. Taylor will need some things for her stay. Clothes, toiletries. Have Maria handle it." "Right away, sir." I wanted to protest that I couldn't afford whatever designer items he was ordering, that I didn't want to be indebted to him, but exhaustion was catching up with me. One night, I reminded myself, I could figure everything out tomorrow with a clear head. The elevator required a keycard to operate. Alessio swiped his, then pressed the button for the top floor. As we ascended, I caught our reflection in the mirrored walls. Him, immaculate despite the rain, and me, looking like something the storm had dragged in. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "Why does there have to be a reason? There's always a reason." The elevator doors opened to a short hallway with only one door at the end. Alessio led the way, using another keycard to enter. The Riverside Suite was larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Craig. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city and the river beyond, lights glimmering through the rain. The decor was understated luxury. Cream-colored furniture, dark wood accents, artwork that looked original and expensive. "The bedroom is through there," Alessio said, gesturing to a door on the right. "The bathroom has everything you should need until Maria brings your things." "I can't pay for this," I said bluntly. I'm not asking you to. He removed his suit jacket, draping it over a chair. The movement drew my attention to his shoulders, to the way his shirt stretched across them. I'm not sleeping with you either. The words came out more defensive than I'd intended. Alessio went still, his expression unreadable. I never suggested you would. His voice had cooled several degrees. The couch converts to a bed. I'll take it. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, and something else. The strange disappointment of someone whose worth has been reduced to one thing for so long that they begin to believe it themselves. I didn't mean, get some rest, Evelyn. He walked to a cabinet and withdrew a crystal tumbler and a bottle of amber liquid. Tomorrow is soon enough to figure out your next steps. I retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. The king-sized bed looked like heaven after the night I'd had, but I forced myself to shower first, washing away the rain and the lingering touch of Craig's hands. The hot water stung the cut on my cheek, a reminder of what I'd left behind. When I emerged, wrapped in a plush robe I'd found hanging on the door, I noticed clothes laid out on the bed, silk pajamas that looked expensive and new, still with tags attached. Maria had come and gone while I was in the shower. The thought of someone entering the room without me knowing sent a chill down my spine. I dressed quickly, then hesitated by the door. Through it, I could hear Alessio speaking quietly, his voice too low to make out words. A business call at this hour? Or was he telling someone about the stray he'd picked up? My bag sat on a chair near the bed, and I rummaged through it, counting my meager cash again. Not enough for a hotel, but maybe enough for a bus ticket out of town tomorrow. I needed a plan. Needed to disappear before Craig started looking for me in earnest. A soft knock on the door made me jump. Evelyn? Alessio's voice was muffled through the wood. I've ordered some food if you're hungry. My stomach growled in response. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. When I opened the door, Alessio was standing there, his tie removed, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked younger somehow, less intimidating, though the intensity in his eyes remained unchanged. Thank you, I said, following him to the dining area where a small feast had been laid out. Pasta, bread, salad, wine. I wasn't sure what you liked, he explained, pulling out a chair for me. As we ate in silence, I felt his eyes on me, studying, assessing. It should have made me uncomfortable, but there was something almost comforting about his attention, so different from Craig's dismissive glances or angry glares. What happens after tonight? I finally asked, setting down my fork. That depends on where you want to go. I had no answer for that. I'd been so focused on getting away that I hadn't thought about where to. I don't know, I admitted. Alessio nodded, as if my uncertainty was perfectly reasonable. Then stay until you do. Our eyes locked across the table, and I felt something shift between us. A door opening to a room I hadn't known existed. Dangerous, whispered a voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my own self-preservation. One day at a time, I said carefully. He raised his glass in agreement. One day at a time. Later, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the rain against the windows and the distant sounds of the city below, I wondered what I'd gotten myself into. There was something about Alessio Vitale that didn't quite add up, the way people deferred to him, the silent security, the casual offer of luxury to a stranger. But for the first time in years, I fell asleep without fear of what the morning would bring. Whatever Alessio's secrets were, they couldn't be worse than what I'd left behind. At least, that's what I told myself as I drifted off, unaware of just how wrong I was. Block 2. Morning came with gentle insistence, sunlight filtering through curtains I didn't remember closing. For a disorienting moment, I forgot where I was. The bed too comfortable, the silence too complete to be my cramped bedroom where Craig's snores would vibrate through the walls. Then it all came rushing back. The rain, the bus stop, the stranger with dark eyes who'd offered sanctuary. I sat up, wincing as my body protested. The bruise on my cheek felt tight and hot when I touched it. A glance in the bathroom mirror confirmed it had darkened overnight, a purple-blue stain spreading across my cheekbone. Craig's parting gift. After a quick shower, I found more clothes laid out, a simple blouse and jeans that somehow fit perfectly, along with underwear still bearing price tags that made me gasp. I dressed quickly, uncomfortable with the expense, but having nothing else clean to wear. The main room of the suite was empty when I emerged. For a moment, I thought Alessio had left, but then I noticed the balcony door slightly ajar. He stood outside, one hand resting on the railing, the other holding a phone to his ear. Even from behind, I could sense tension in his posture, in the way he held himself perfectly still as he spoke. I don't care what it takes. Find him. His voice carried through the gap, cold and sharp as a blade. No excuses. No witnesses. A chill ran through me, and I stepped back instinctively. Whatever business Alessio Vitale conducted, it clearly wasn't always conducted within the bounds of the law. I retreated to the bedroom, heart pounding, suddenly aware of how little I knew about the man whose help I'd accepted. Minutes later, a soft knock on the door made me jump. "Evelyn, are you awake?" His voice had returned to the smooth, controlled tone I remembered from the night before. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I needed the shelter he offered, at least for now. "Yes, I'm up." When I opened the door, Alessio stood there in a fresh suit, charcoal gray this time, his hair perfectly styled. If he'd slept on the couch, there was no evidence of it in his appearance. "You look better," he said, his eyes lingering on my bruised cheek before meeting my gaze. "Feel better too," I replied cautiously. "Thank you for the clothes. They fit perfectly. Maria is good at her job." He gestured toward the dining table where breakfast had been laid out. "You should eat." As we sat across from each other, I tried to reconcile the man before me. Attentive, quietly courteous, with the cold voice I'd overheard on the balcony. People contained multitudes, I knew that. But some multitudes were more dangerous than others. "I should go today," I said, spreading jam on a piece of toast I didn't really want. "I've imposed enough. Where will you go?" The question was casual, but his eyes were intent on my face. I hesitated, realizing I still had no answer, no plan beyond escape. "I have a friend in Sacramento." The lie came easily, born of self-preservation. In truth, Craig had systematically cut me off from everyone I'd once called friend. Alessio took a sip of his coffee, studying me over the rim. "You're not a very good liar, Evelyn." My hand froze midair, toast suspended between plate and mouth. "Excuse me? Your eyes give you away. They slide to the left when you're being dishonest." I set the toast down, appetite vanishing. "I don't know you well enough to lie to you." And yet, here we are. His tone wasn't accusatory, merely observational. "Stay. At least until you have somewhere real to go." "Why do you care?" Alessio was quiet for a long moment, and I had the distinct impression he was deciding how much truth to give me. "6 years ago," he finally said, "my sister tried to leave her husband. He found her at a motel outside the city." His expression didn't change, but something dark passed behind his eyes. "She didn't survive the night." The words landed like stones, heavy with implication. I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "As am I." He straightened, the moment of vulnerability passing so quickly I might have imagined it. "Your situation reminded me of hers." I wanted to ask what had happened to her husband, but something in Alessio's face warned against it. Instead, I nodded slowly. "A few days, then. Just until I figure things out." Relief flickered across his features. So briefly I nearly missed it. "Good. Now, I have meetings this morning, but Marco will be available if you need anything." "Marco? Your driver?" "My head of security." He stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "He'll take you wherever you want to go. Shopping, sightseeing. The city is yours to explore." The casual offer of a personal driver, a security chief no less, struck me again as excessive. "What exactly do you do, Alessio?" A smile touched his lips. "I'm in logistics, import, export, moving valuable things from one place to another." He retrieved his phone from the table. "I also have interests in real estate and hospitality, hence this hotel." It sounded legitimate enough, but something in the practiced way he delivered the explanation made me wonder. "Will you be back tonight?" I asked, surprised by my own question. "I'll join you for dinner." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Evelyn, should anyone ask, you're my guest, nothing more." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me with more questions than answers, and the distinct feeling that I'd stepped into something larger than a simple act of kindness. I spent the morning exploring the suite, which was larger than I'd initially realized. Besides the main living area and the bedroom I'd used, there was a second bedroom, a study lined with leather-bound books, and a bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. Everything spoke of quiet luxury. Nothing flashy, but clearly expensive. In the study, I found myself drawn to the books, real books, not just decorative spines. Many were in Italian, but there were classics in English too. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Shakespeare. I ran my fingers along the spines, wondering what these choices said about Alessio Vitale. A knock at the suite's main door interrupted my exploration. When I opened it, I found Marco standing in the hallway, his massive frame nearly filling the doorway. Up close and in daylight, he was even more intimidating than he'd been in the rain. At least 6'5", with a face that looked like it had been broken and imperfectly reset more than once. "Ms. Taylor," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man his size. "Mr. Vitale asked me to see if you needed anything." "I'm fine, thank you." I shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. "If you'd like to go out, I'm at your disposal." He handed me a business card with just his name and a phone number. "Actually," I said, making a sudden decision, "I could use some air." 20 minutes later, I found myself in the back seat of the same SUV from the night before, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. Marco drove in silence, occasionally checking the rearview mirror, though whether he was watching me or the traffic behind us, I couldn't tell. "How long have you worked for Alessio?" I asked, trying to fill the silence. 15 years, he replied, eyes on the road. "You must know him well." Marco's expression didn't change. "Well enough." "Is he always this generous with strangers?" This earned me a quick glance in the mirror. "Mr. Vitale is selective about who he helps." "Lucky me," I murmured. "Yes," Marco said simply. "You are." We drove through downtown, past shops and cafes filled with people going about their normal lives. Lives with routines and certainties I'd never quite managed to establish with Craig, who thrived on chaos and keeping me off balance. "Could we stop somewhere?" I asked suddenly. "A pharmacy, maybe?" Marco nodded, turning at the next intersection. He pulled up in front of a small drugstore, then shocked me by getting out and opening my door. "I'll wait here," he said. Inside, I headed straight for the makeup aisle, selecting a concealer I hoped would cover the worst of my bruise. As I paid, I noticed Marco through the window, standing beside the SUV, his eyes constantly scanning the street. Not just a driver, I reminded myself. Head of security. Back in the car, I applied the concealer using the small mirror in my compact, watching as the evidence of Craig's violence disappeared beneath layers of beige. The woman who looked back at me seemed different somehow. Still me, but with a strange new awareness in her eyes. "Where to next?" Marco asked. I hesitated, then decided to test the limits of Alessio's hospitality. "Is there a place I could get a coffee?" "Sit for a while." "Of course." He pulled away from the curb. "There's a cafe Mr. Vitale prefers." The cafe turned out to be a charming little place tucked away on a side street, with wrought iron tables on a patio overlooking a small park. As we approached, I noticed how the staff straightened when they saw Marco, their eyes widening slightly. "Mr. Vitale's usual table," he told the hostess, who immediately led us to a corner spot with a perfect view of both the park and the entrance. "Will Mr. Vitale be joining you?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Just Ms. Taylor today," Marco replied. I ordered a cappuccino, watching as Marco took a position several feet away, his back to the wall, eyes constantly moving. The cafe was busy but not crowded, filled with the gentle hum of conversation and the occasional laugh. Normal. Safe. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sitting in a bubble, separated from the reality around me. My phone, the prepaid one I'd bought in secret and hidden from Craig, buzzed in my purse. My heart stuttered as I saw the number. Craig. 3 missed calls and now a text. "Where the fuck are you? Get home now!" My hands trembled as I shoved the phone back into my purse. How long before he started searching for me? Before he called the few friends I had left. My mother, who'd moved to Florida last year after one too many uncomfortable encounters with her son-in-law. "Everything okay, Ms. Taylor?" Marco had moved closer, concern etched on his rugged face. "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile, just enjoying the sunshine. I sipped my cappuccino, trying to calm my racing heart. Craig had never been this angry before, never hit me quite so deliberately. Always before, there had been a twisted logic to his violence. Punishment for some perceived slight, for dinner being cold, for speaking to another man too long at a party. But last night had been different. Colder, more calculated. As if he'd finally tired of the game and was ready to end it. The thought sent ice through my veins. "Actually, Marco, I think I'd like to go back to the hotel now." He nodded once, already signaling for the check. Back at the Riverview, I paced the suite, my momentary calm shattered. What was I doing here, playing house in this luxury apartment, accepting clothes and food from a man I barely knew? A man who, if my instincts were right, operated outside the law in ways I didn't want to examine too closely. Yet, what were my alternatives? I had almost no money, no job, no friends I could trust not to tell Craig where I was. I could go to a shelter, but Craig's construction company worked with several local charities. He would find me. By evening, I'd worked myself into such a state of anxiety that when the door opened and Alessio walked in, I nearly jumped out of my skin. He paused in the doorway, taking in my flustered appearance. What happened? Nothing, I said too quickly. Just thinking. He set his briefcase down, loosening his tie. Marco said you seemed upset at the cafe. Of course, he'd reported back. Craig texted me, I admitted. He knows I'm gone. Alessio's expression darkened. Did you tell him where you are? No, I didn't respond at all. He nodded, satisfied. Good. He moved to the bar and poured 2 drinks, handing me one. Tell me about him. I took a sip, the whiskey burning a path down my throat. What do you want to know? Everything. What he does, where he goes, his routines. The clinical detachment in his voice sent a chill through me. Why? Alessio's dark eyes met mine. Knowledge is protection, Evelyn. The more I know about him, the better I can keep you safe. There was logic to it, but something in his tone suggested more than simple security concerns. I remembered the phone call I'd overheard. No witnesses. He owns a construction company, I said carefully. Taylor Construction. Mostly commercial projects, some government contracts. Legitimate business? The question was casual, but his eyes were intent. I gave a hollow laugh. On paper. He cuts corners everywhere he can. Substandard materials, undocumented workers paid in cash. I took another sip of whiskey. He has friends in the permit office, in inspections. Politicians? A city councilman. They play golf. The words spilled out now, 6 years of silent observation finally finding voice. Craig has a temper, but he's careful about who sees it. In public, he's charming, generous, the perfect husband. And in private? I touched my concealed bruise, a reflex I couldn't suppress. You saw. Alessio's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Does he own a gun? The question startled me. Yes, several. He hunts. Would he use them on you? The bluntness of the question knocked the air from my lungs. Would he? A month ago, I'd have said no without hesitation. Now, I wasn't so sure. I don't know. I whispered. He's never threatened me with one, but yesterday, something was different. Like he'd crossed some line in his head. Alessio nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. You won't go back to him. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No. Good. He set his glass down with a finality that somehow comforted me. Now, I believe I promised you dinner. Dinner turned out to be at a restaurant on the top floor of the hotel, a place so exclusive it didn't even have a sign on the door. The maitre d' greeted Alessio by name, leading us to a secluded table overlooking the river, now glittering with the reflected lights of the city. Throughout the meal, course after exquisite course of food I couldn't name but found delicious, Alessio kept the conversation light, asking about my interests, my past before Craig. He listened with genuine attention as I told him about my abandoned career in graphic design, about the small portfolio of work I'd managed to keep hidden on a cloud drive Craig didn't know about. You should show me sometime, he said, refilling my wine glass. I have associates who might be interested in your work. It's been years, I demurred. I'm probably rusty. Skills like that don't disappear, Evelyn. They just wait to be rediscovered. There was something about the way he said it, as if he saw potential in me that I'd long forgotten existed, that warmed me more than the wine. As we lingered over dessert, I found myself studying him openly, trying to reconcile the different facets I'd glimpsed. The businessman, the protective brother, the man who'd ordered someone found with no witnesses. You're staring, he observed, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I'm trying to figure you out, I admitted. And what have you concluded? That you're more complicated than you appear, and that there's a lot you're not telling me. His smile deepened, reaching his eyes this time. We all have our secrets, Evelyn, even you. I'm not that interesting. I disagree. He leaned forward slightly. A woman who endures 6 years with a monster, then walks away with nothing but what she can carry. That takes a kind of courage few possess. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, validation I hadn't known I needed. For years, Craig had systematically dismantled my self-worth, convinced me that leaving was an impossibility, that I was nothing without him. And here was this man, this dangerous, enigmatic man, seeing strength where I'd only seen survival. It wasn't courage, I said softly. It was desperation. They're often the same thing. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching mine. What pushed you over the edge after all that time? I stared at our nearly touching hands, at the contrast between his manicured nails and the bitten stubs of mine. He killed something, I said finally. A stray cat that had been coming to our back door. I'd been feeding it scraps. When he found out, I swallowed hard. He said it was to teach me a lesson about attachment, about consequences. Alessio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A darkness that should have frightened me but somehow didn't. And you realized you might be next, he said quietly. I nodded. Not right away, but later that night when he hit me, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, like he was looking at me the way he'd looked at that cat. Alessio's hand finally closed over mine, warm and solid. You won't go back, he repeated, and this time it sounded like a promise. As we walked back to the suite, his hand resting lightly on my lower back, I was acutely aware of the eyes that followed us. Hotel staff, security personnel positioned discreetly at intervals, even other guests, all watching with a mixture of curiosity and deference that spoke volumes about Alessio's position, whatever it truly was. At the door to the suite, he paused. I have calls to make. Business in Europe doesn't wait for our time zone. Of course, I said, inexplicably disappointed. He studied my face for a moment, then leaned down slowly, giving me plenty of time to pull away. When he pressed his lips to my unbruised cheek, the contact was brief but electric, sending a current through me that I hadn't felt in years, if ever. Good night, Evelyn, he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. As I lay in bed later, replaying the moment over and over, I told myself I was being foolish, that whatever I thought I was feeling was just gratitude and relief wrapped in the intoxicating package of attention from an attractive man. That getting involved with someone like Alessio Vitale, someone with secrets deep and dark enough to drown in, was the last thing I needed. Yet when I finally drifted off to sleep, it was his face I saw, not Craig's. And for the first time in years, the dreams that came were not nightmares. The next 3 days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings, I would wake to find Alessio already gone, a note left on the dining table informing me he'd return for dinner. Days, I would explore the city with Marco as my silent shadow, gaining confidence with each hour spent away from Craig's influence. Evenings, Alessio and I would share meals and conversation that stretched into the night, carefully circling each other like dancers learning a new routine. It was a strange limbo, not quite freedom, not quite captivity. The luxury surrounding me was both sanctuary and reminder that I still had no real plan beyond the walls of the Riverview. On the 4th morning, I woke to raised voices in the main room of the suite. I froze, Craig's conditioning making me instinctively curl smaller in the bed, but the voices weren't angry, they were urgent. And one belonged to Alessio. Needs to be handled today, not tomorrow, not next week. His voice was controlled, but tight with tension. The Colombians are getting nervous, another voice replied. They're asking questions about the shipment. Let them ask. We've never given them reason to doubt us before. And the other matter? The second voice lowered, but I strained to hear. The husband? My blood turned to ice. They were talking about Craig, under surveillance. He's becoming a problem. Should I? No, not yet. I want to see what he does next. The conversation shifted to Italian, too rapid for me to catch even if I'd understood the language. I lay perfectly still, heart hammering in my chest, until I heard the main door open and close. When I finally ventured out, dressed in another outfit that had mysteriously appeared in my size, Alessio was alone, staring out at the city. Good morning, I said carefully, watching his reflection in the window. He turned, his expression softening when he saw me. I'm sorry if we woke you. Business? I asked, moving to pour myself coffee from the carafe on the table. Always. He joined me, taking the cup from my hands and setting it down. "We need to talk, Evelyn." Fear curled in my stomach. "About?" "Your husband made a police report yesterday. Missing persons." I nearly laughed. "Missing?" He knows exactly why I'm gone. Nevertheless, he's playing the concerned spouse. Very convincingly, according to my sources. I sank into a chair, legs suddenly unsteady. "Your sources in the police department?" Alessio didn't bother denying it. "He's been to your mother's house, your former workplace. He's showing your picture around town." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Craig was looking for me, publicly, strategically. Playing the victim while hunting for his prey. "He won't stop," I whispered. "Not until he finds me." "He won't find you," Alessio said with such certainty that I looked up sharply. "But we need to consider your options." "We?" He knelt before my chair, taking my hands in his. "Yes, we. I told you before. You're not going back to him." The intensity in his eyes should have frightened me, but instead it anchored me. "What are my options?" "You could leave the city. Start fresh somewhere he wouldn't think to look." "With what money? What identification?" "He has everything, Alessio." The panic rose in my throat. "My ID, my social security card, my birth certificate. I can't even get on a plane. I can arrange those things." Of course he could. And then what? Live looking over my shoulder forever? He's not the type to let go. Not ever. Alessio's jaw tightened. "There's another option." "Which is?" "Stay with me." He said it simply, as if offering me coffee rather than a complete upheaval of my existence. "Not here in the hotel. I have a house outside the city, private, secure. And do what? Be your... what? Girlfriend? Mistress?" The words came out harsher than I intended. "Be safe," he countered. "Until we deal with the situation permanently." The way he said permanently sent a chill through me. What does that mean exactly? Alessio stood, moving away slightly. "It means I can ensure he never bothers you again." "By doing what?" I pressed, needing to hear him say it. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "By whatever means necessary." The air between us grew heavy with unspoken implications. I should have been horrified, should have run from the room, from the hotel, from this man who spoke so calmly of violence. Instead, I felt something dangerously close to relief. "I can't ask you to do that," I said finally. "Whatever that is. You're not asking. I'm offering." I studied him. This man who'd become my unexpected protector. "Who are you really, Alessio? You know who I am. I know what you've shown me." He seemed to consider this, weighing how much truth to give. "I run an organization," he said carefully. "A family business, you might say. Import, export, as I told you before. But also, problem solving. You're in the Mafia." The words slipped out before I could stop them. His smile was slight but genuine. "Such an American term. We prefer La Familia." The confirmation should have shocked me, but it only crystallized what I'd already suspected. The deference from others, the security, the resources at his disposal, it all made sense now. "And I'm what? A charity case? A distraction?" I asked, surprised by the hurt in my voice. Alessio moved closer again, his hand coming up to brush my cheek where the bruise had faded to a yellowish shadow. "You are someone who needed help when our paths crossed. Someone who matters to me now." The simple honesty in his voice broke something loose inside me, a dam holding back emotions I'd suppressed for years. Before I realized what I was doing, I leaned forward, pressing my lips to his. For a heartbeat, he remained still. Then his arms came around me, pulling me closer as he deepened the kiss. There was nothing tentative about the way he claimed my mouth, nothing hesitant in how his hands spread across my back, pressing me to him as if he could absorb me into himself. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't before. Vulnerability beneath the control, need beneath the power. "I should leave," I said, though I made no move to step away. "This is complicated." "Life is complicated," he replied, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "It doesn't mean we don't live it." The ringing of his phone shattered the moment. Alessio glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I have to take this." As he moved away to answer, speaking rapid Italian, I touched my lips, still feeling the pressure of his kiss. What was I doing? Jumping from one dangerous man to another? Yet Alessio's danger felt different. Not directed at me, but at the world that would harm me. When he returned, His face was composed once more, though tension radiated from him. I have to go out. Business that can't wait. Is everything okay? A minor complication. He retrieved his jacket from the back of a chair. Marco will stay with you. Don't leave the hotel today. The command in his voice triggered an old defensiveness. I'm not a prisoner, Alessio. He paused, softening visibly. No, you're not. But you are in danger, more than you realize. Please, Evelyn, for your safety. Put that way, I couldn't argue. All right. For today. He nodded, satisfied, then crossed to me again, pressing another brief but intense kiss to my lips. We'll continue this conversation tonight. After he left, I paced the suite, my mind racing with everything that had happened. Alessio Vitale, not just a businessman with a dark edge, but an actual Mafia boss, and I'd kissed him. Wanted more than kisses, if I was honest with myself. My phone buzzed from the bedroom. I retrieved it from the nightstand where I'd left it, seeing Craig's number again. Instead of a text this time, there was a voicemail. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. I know you're still in the city. His voice was eerily calm, more frightening than his shouts had ever been. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little Italian? Your fancy hotel? You've made a very big mistake, Evie. Come home now, and maybe, I can forgive you. But if you make me come get you. The message ended with his soft, terrible laughter. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. He knew, somehow, he knew where I was, who I was with. The walls of my sanctuary suddenly felt paper thin. I needed to warn Alessio, needed to tell him that Craig knew that he was coming. I looked around frantically for Marco's card, finding it in my purse. As I dialed, a knock came at the suite door. Cautious after Craig's message, I approached slowly. Who is it? Room service, ma'am. I hadn't ordered anything. I didn't call for room service. A pause. Mr. Vitale arranged it before he left. Lunch. It seemed plausible. Alessio was always thinking ahead, always providing. I opened the door. Craig stood there. A hotel uniform jacket stretched too tight across his shoulders. A room service cart before him. Hello, Evie, he said, shoving the cart forward into my stomach, forcing me back as he stepped into the suite. Missed me? The door clicked shut behind Craig with terrible finality. I stumbled backward, the service cart between us like a flimsy barricade. 6 years of conditioning made my body freeze, my throat close, my mind go blank with familiar terror. Nice place, Craig said, looking around the suite with exaggerated appreciation. Way above your pay grade, but then, you're not paying, are you? I glanced toward the bedroom where my phone lay on the floor. Marco's number still displayed. If I could just reach it. Looking for this? Craig pulled a gun from his waistband, holding it casually at his side. Don't bother running, Evie. We both know you never get far. How did you find me? I managed, my voice barely audible. He smiled, that charming smile that had once made me believe I was the luckiest woman alive. You think I don't have friends? One of them saw you at a cafe with your bodyguard. His face twisted. You're sleeping with a gangster now? That's how little respect you have for our marriage? There is no marriage, I said, finding strength in the truth. Not anymore. Craig's expression darkened. Till death do us part, remember? Those were the vows you took. The menace in his voice made my skin crawl. I edged sideways, trying to create distance. What do you want, Craig? What's mine? He stepped around the cart, closing the distance between us. You embarrassed me, Evie. Made me file a missing persons report like some helpless cuckold. People are talking. I left because you hurt me. Because you killed that cat just to... His hand shot out, grabbing my throat, squeezing just enough to cut off my words. That mangy thing? That's what this is about? A fucking stray? Let go, I gasped, clawing at his fingers. We're leaving, he said, dragging me toward the door. Right now, before your Italian boyfriend gets back. Terror gave me strength I didn't know I had. I brought my knee up hard between his legs, gratified by his howl of pain as he doubled over. His grip on my throat loosened, and I twisted away, lunging for the bedroom. I didn't make it 3 steps before he caught my hair, yanking me backward with such force that I saw stars. The gun came up, pressing against my temple. Try that again, he hissed, his breath hot against my ear. And I'll paint these fancy walls with your brains. They'll kill you, I whispered. Alessio will hunt you down. Craig laughed, the sound vibrating through me. You think I'm afraid of some import-export thug? I've got friends too, Evie. Important friends. He began pulling me toward the door, the gun still pressed to my head. My mind raced frantically. Marco was somewhere in the hotel. If I could make noise, create a disturbance. The sound of a key card in the door froze us both in place. Craig shifted, putting me between himself and the entrance, the gun now pressed to my back. Not a word, he breathed. The door opened, revealing Marco, his massive frame filling the doorway. He registered the scene in an instant. My terrified face, the position of Craig's arm, the subtle bulge of the gun beneath my jacket. "Ms. Taylor," he said calmly. "Everything all right?" "Fine," Craig answered for me, his voice a perfect imitation of concern. "My wife isn't feeling well. I'm taking her home." Marco's eyes never left mine. "Ms. Taylor?" Craig's finger tightened on the trigger, the pressure a terrible promise against my spine. I said nothing, but let my eyes plead with Marco, hoping he could read the desperation there. Marco nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Let me help you to the car then. We've got it, thanks," Craig said, edging us toward the door. What happened next unfolded so quickly I barely processed it. Marco stepped aside as if to let us pass, then moved with a speed incongruous with his size. One moment Craig was behind me, the next he was on the floor, Marco's knee in his back, the gun skittering across the carpet. "Run!" Marco shouted, struggling to keep Craig pinned. I bolted for the door, but Craig's hand shot out, catching my ankle and sending me sprawling. As I hit the floor, I heard a sickening crunch, followed by Marco's grunt of pain. Rolling over, I saw Craig staggering to his feet, blood streaming from his nose, a letter opener from the desk clutched in his hand. Marco was on one knee, clutching his side where a crimson stain was spreading. Craig lurched toward the gun, still on the floor near the window. I reacted without thinking, scrambling across the carpet. My fingers closed around the cold metal, just as Craig's foot connected with my ribs, sending pain lancing through me. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, looming over me. "After everything I've done for you." I rolled onto my back, the gun clutched in both hands, pointing up at him. "Stay away from me." He paused, eyes widening slightly before his face split in a mocking grin. "You won't use that. You don't have the spine." He was right. My hands shook, my finger barely touching the trigger. 6 years of psychological dismantling had done its work too well. I couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't cross that line. Craig saw the hesitation in my eyes and lunged forward. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Craig stumbled, clutching his shoulder, shock and rage contorting his features. "You shot me," he said, incredulous. "You actually fucking shot me." I scrambled backward, still holding the gun, watching in horror as blood seeped between his fingers. What had I done? The suite door burst open again, and 2 men in suits rushed in, weapons drawn. Security, I realized dimly. The gunshot had brought them running. "Secure him," Marco ordered from where he still knelt, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. "Call Mr. Vitale." Everything after that blurred into a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. Security restraining Craig, who alternated between threats and pleas. Paramedics arriving to tend to Marco. Police, their questions a buzz of white noise I couldn't process. And then, cutting through it all like a blade, Alessio's voice as he entered the chaos of the suite. "Evelyn." Just my name, but it anchored me back to reality. I looked up from where I sat on the couch. A blanket someone had draped around my shoulders, the gun long since taken from my numb fingers. Alessio crossed the room in swift strides, kneeling before me. His hands cupped my face, turning it gently as he examined me for injuries. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, though my ribs throbbed where Craig had kicked me. "Marco, we'll be fine. The wound is superficial." His eyes, usually so controlled, blazed with an emotion I couldn't name. "I should never have left you." "He knew," I whispered. "Craig knew where I was, who you were." Alessio's jaw tightened. "I'm aware. The leak has been addressed." The cold precision of his words should have disturbed me, but I felt only a distant relief. "The police are handling everything according to protocol," he finished smoothly. "Your husband attacked you in your hotel room. You defended yourself. Marco and hotel security will corroborate. I stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. You have the police in your pocket too. Not all of them, he said with a slight smile, but enough. A detective approached, his manner deferential as he addressed Alessio. Mr. Vitale, we'll need Ms. Taylor's statement. Tomorrow, Alessio said firmly. She's in shock. The detective hesitated, then nodded. Of course, first thing tomorrow. He handed me his card. We've taken your husband to the hospital under guard. He'll be charged with assault, breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon. Will that be enough to hold him? I asked, remembering Craig's boasts about his important friends. With Mr. Vitale's security footage backing your statement? Absolutely. After they left, taking Craig's blood and the chaos with them, the suite fell into an eerie silence. Alessio sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, solid and warm. What happens now? I asked, my voice small in the quiet. Now, you rest, he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. Tomorrow, we move to my house as planned. And Craig? Alessio's expression hardened. Craig will never bother you again. You can't kill him, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He raised an eyebrow. Can I? I don't want that, I insisted. I don't want his blood on your hands. Or mine. Alessio was silent for a long moment, studying me with those dark, unfathomable eyes. Even after everything he's done? Especially after everything, I took his hand, feeling its strength, its capacity for violence and tenderness alike. I want to be free of him, yes, but not like that. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. There are other ways, he said finally. Less permanent, but effective. What ways? Evidence, he said simply. Of his corruption, his criminal connections. Enough to ensure he goes to prison for a very long time, regardless of his important friends. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by exhaustion. The adrenaline that had kept me functioning was ebbing, leaving me hollow and drained. Alessio seemed to sense it, gathering me into his arms as he stood. Sleep now, he murmured, carrying me to the bedroom. I'll be here when you wake. As he laid me gently on the bed, I caught his hand. Stay, I whispered. Please. He hesitated only a moment before stretching out beside me, gathering me against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, his arms secure around me. I thought I'd lost you today, he said quietly into the darkness. When I got that call, I lifted my head, finding his face in the shadows. I'm still here. Yes, he agreed, his hand coming up to stroke my hair. And as long as I'm breathing, you always will be. The promise in his voice should have frightened me. Its intensity, its possessiveness. Instead, it wrapped around me like armor, protection after years of vulnerability. As I drifted toward sleep, safe in the arms of a man who commanded fear from others, but showed me only tenderness, I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Morning came with gentle insistence, sunlight filtering through curtains that had been drawn sometime during my restless sleep. I blinked awake to find Alessio sitting on the edge of the bed, already dressed in another impeccable suit, watching me with an intensity that sent warmth spreading through my chest. You're still here, I said, voice raspy from sleep and yesterday's ordeal. I promised I would be. He reached out, brushing hair from my face with a tenderness that belied the power I knew his hands possessed. How do you feel? I took inventory of my body, ribs tender where Craig had kicked me, muscles sore from the struggle, but nothing broken. The real damage, as always, lay deeper. I've been worse. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's not reassuring. I'm okay, I amended, pushing myself to sit up. Really? Alessio nodded, though the concern didn't leave his eyes. The detective will be here in an hour for your statement. After that, we leave. To your house? I asked, remembering our conversation from before Craig's intrusion. Yes, unless you've changed your mind. I hadn't, though the events of yesterday had cast everything in a sharper, more defined light. Alessio wasn't just a mysterious businessman with a dark edge. He was a man with the power and willingness to eliminate those who threatened what he considered his. And somehow I had become included in that category. I haven't, I said, but I need to know what I'm walking into, Alessio. The whole truth. He was silent for a moment, weighing his response. My family has operated in this country for 3 generations, he said finally. We have interests in shipping, real estate, nightclubs, casinos, some legal, some in gray areas. And the not-so-gray areas? His smile was slight. Those too. Do you kill people? The bluntness of my question surprised even me. Alessio didn't flinch, when necessary. To protect what's mine, his eyes held mine, unflinching. Does that frighten you? It should have. Any sane person would be terrified, would be running for the door. Instead, I felt a strange calm. What frightens me is going back to living in fear, of always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next blow to fall. That won't happen, he promised. Not while I'm alive. The detective's arrival interrupted any further conversation. Giving my statement was surprisingly straightforward. The detective was professional but deferential, never pushing when I hesitated, accepting my account without question. Throughout the interview, Alessio remained at my side, his presence both reassuring and a silent reminder of the power dynamics at play. Mr. Taylor remains in the hospital under guard, the detective informed us as he prepared to leave. Once released, he'll be transferred directly to county lockup. Given the charges and the evidence, bail is unlikely. And if he does make bail? I asked, unable to keep the anxiety from my voice. The restraining order will be in effect. He comes within 500 feet of you. He goes straight back to jail. The detective glanced at Alessio, though I doubt he'll risk it. After he left, we moved quickly. A small suitcase had appeared, packed, I assumed, by the mysterious Maria, with the clothes that had accumulated during my stay. Within an hour, we were in the SUV, Marco replaced by another security man, heading out of the city. Alessio's house turned out to be an estate, set back from a private road behind gates and walls that spoke more of security than ostentation. The main house was surprisingly understated, a sprawling stone structure that blended with the wooded landscape rather than dominating it. It's beautiful, I said as we pulled into the circular drive. It was my parents' home, Alessio explained. After they died, I considered selling it, but he trailed off, looking at the house with what might have been nostalgia. Some connections are worth preserving. Inside, the house was a blend of old-world craftsmanship and modern comfort. Wooden beams crossed high ceilings, stone fireplaces anchored spacious rooms, and large windows filled the space with natural light. It felt lived in, genuine in a way the hotel suite, for all its luxury, had not. A small staff greeted us, a housekeeper, a cook, a groundskeeper. All treated Alessio with the same mixture of respect and wariness I'd observed at the hotel. Me, they regarded with barely disguised curiosity. They're wondering who you are, Alessio said later, as he showed me to my room. A beautiful space with its own sitting area and a bathroom larger than Craig's entire master suite. I've never brought anyone here before. Never? I asked, surprised. This is my sanctuary, he explained, moving to open the French doors that led to a private balcony overlooking gardens, and beyond them, a lake glittering in the afternoon sun. Few people know this place exists. Fewer still have been invited. The implications of his statement settled over me. The trust he was extending, the rarity of the gesture. Thank you, I said simply, hoping he understood I meant for more than just the room. Alessio turned from the view, his expression softening as he looked at me. There's something I need to show you. He led me down a hallway to a room at the far end of the house. When he opened the door, I gasped. It was a studio, large windows providing perfect north light, easels and drafting tables arranged throughout the space, walls lined with art supplies. I remembered you said you were a graphic designer, he said, watching my reaction. I thought perhaps you might want to start creating again. I moved through the space, touching brushes, sketchbooks, a state-of-the-art computer setup in one corner, everything a designer could dream of. When did you do this? I made a call yesterday before... His expression darkened momentarily, before everything happened. The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed me. Craig had systematically dismantled my career, my passion, convincing me it was worthless. A hobby not worth pursuing, and here was Alessio, a man who barely knew me, creating a space for that very part of myself I'd been forced to suppress. I don't know what to say, I whispered, emotion threatening to close my throat. Say you'll use it, he replied simply. Say you'll create again, I nodded, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. The following days settled into a new rhythm, different from the hotel, more grounded in a sense of permanence. I spent mornings in the studio, reconnecting with skills long dormant but not forgotten, afternoons exploring the grounds, sometimes with Alessio when his business permitted, often alone, discovering hidden gardens and paths through the woods that surrounded the property. Evenings were for dinner together, conversations that stretched late into the night, and a growing physical awareness that neither of us acted upon, though it hung between us like an unspoken promise. A week after our arrival, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset paint the lake in golds and reds, Alessio received a call that changed his demeanor instantly. He spoke briefly in Italian, his expression hardening with each word. When he hung up, he stared at the phone for a long moment before looking at me. "What is it?" I asked, knowing instinctively it involved Craig. "Your husband made bail this afternoon," he said, his voice controlled. "One of the city councilmen vouched for him. The same one you mentioned he plays golf with." Cold fear washed through me, but the restraining order is still in effect, Alessio assured me, "and you're safe here. He doesn't know this place exists." I nodded, trying to believe him. "What about the evidence you mentioned, the corruption proof to keep him in prison?" "My people are working on it." Alessio's gaze was steady. "It takes time to build a case that will stick, especially against someone with political connections." That night, I couldn't sleep. The knowledge that Craig was free, possibly looking for me, brought back the familiar hypervigilance, the tense muscles, the racing heart, the startling at every sound. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and went downstairs. Seeking tea or simply movement to calm my nerves, I found Alessio in the library, a single lamp illuminating the documents spread before him on the desk. He looked up when I entered, unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting me. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head, moving closer to see what occupied him at this hour. Photos, documents, what looked like financial statements, all related to Craig, I realized. Evidence being assembled meticulously, piece by piece. "Neither could I," Alessio admitted, leaning back in his chair. "Not while he's out there, thinking he can still reach you." Something in his voice made me look at him more closely. "What are you planning?" "Nothing you need to worry about, Alessio." I placed my hand over the documents, forcing him to meet my eyes. "No violence. You promised." His expression softened. "I remember. And I'll keep that promise." He took my hand, turning it over to trace the lines of my palm. "But I can't promise he won't suffer in other ways." I should have objected, should have insisted on complete nonviolence. Instead, I found myself nodding. "Just don't put yourself at risk. He's not worth it." Alessio stood, pulling me gently to him. "You are." The kiss that followed was different from our first, not born of impulse or momentary connection, but of something deeper that had been building between us. His hands cradled my face as if I were something precious, his lips moving against mine with a reverence that made my heart ache. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, our breath mingling in the quiet of the library. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured, "just to sleep. I don't want you alone with your fears." In his bedroom, a masculine space of dark woods and deep blues, we lay together, my back against his chest, his arms secure around my waist. For the first time since learning of Craig's release, I felt my muscles relax, my breathing slow. "I think I'm falling in love with you," I whispered into the darkness, not sure if he was still awake to hear it. His arm tightened around me. "I know I've already fallen," he replied, his lips brushing my shoulder. "From the moment I saw you at that bus stop, trying so hard to be brave." 2 days later, the news broke. Craig Taylor, owner of Taylor Construction, arrested on multiple charges of fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and bribery. The city councilmen implicated as well. Their mugshots splashed across every local news outlet, their reputations in tatters. "You're doing?" I asked Alessio as we watched the coverage. He shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "Let's just say my organization has resources that made the evidence impossible to ignore or bury." The trial was swift by legal standards, the evidence overwhelming. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, with a sentence of 15 years, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't known I was carrying. Not just the fear of Craig finding me, but the deeper burden of the life I'd left behind. With his conviction, the divorce proceedings I'd initiated moved forward unopposed, fast-tracked by judges who mysteriously seemed eager to accommodate. 6 months to the day from when Alessio had found me at that rain-soaked bus stop, I stood in the studio he'd created for me, putting the finishing touches on a new logo for one of his legitimate businesses. My freelance design career had flourished, with Alessio's connections opening doors, but my talent keeping them open. Arms wrapped around me from behind, lips brushing my neck. "Working late again?" Alessio murmured. I leaned back into his embrace. "Just finishing up. What about you? How was Milan?" "Productive." He turned me to face him, his eyes roaming my face as if memorizing it after his 3-day absence. "But lonely." "Well, you're home now." The word came naturally. Home. This place that had started as refuge had become something more, a beginning. Alessio's hands framed my face. "Marry me." The question, not really a question at all, hung between us. There were 1,000 reasons to say no. His world, his business, the danger that would always surround him, the fact that I was barely 6 months divorced from a marriage that had nearly destroyed me, yet there was only one reason that mattered for saying yes. In his arms, with all his complications and darkness, I had found not just safety, but something I'd thought forever beyond my reach. Happiness. "Yes," I said simply. His smile, rare and transformative, lit his face before he claimed my lips in a kiss that held both passion and promise. Whatever came next, whatever challenges his world might bring, we would face them together, not as victim and savior, but as equals who had chosen each other with eyes wide open. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle and cleansing, so different from the storm that had brought us together, a reminder that sometimes the darkest nights lead to the brightest beginnings.